Excellent. Welcome everybody to this webinar presentation. I hope you can hear me and I hope you can see me. If you have comments or if you have something that you'd like to say, maybe a question, let's type those questions into the chat box on the right-hand side of the webinar screen. I would like to do a quick sound and video check, so I hope that you can hear me. It would be great if somebody could just confirm for me that the audio is working for our webinar presentation today. I know it's the afternoon over there. Here it's the morning. Thank you once again for joining me for this webinar presentation. Let me check. I would like it if somebody can confirm for me that the sound is working. Will somebody write into the chat box that you can hear me, that you can see me? We are about to get started. I see that we have quite a large number of attendees joining us for our presentation today. Thanks again to you all for joining us. Wonderful, fantastic, great. That's good. So we are ready to get started with our presentation. Thank you for joining us. Thanks again, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this evening. My name is Gareth Dyke, and this is a webinar presentation brought to you by TopEdit. TopEdit is an international editing and language services company providing expert English language presentation and editing skills, training and editing. So my name is Gareth Dyke, and in our presentation today, we are going to be talking about effective writing and publishing in English. We hope that we can help you to be as effective as possible in your writing and in your publishing. I hope that you are ready, because now we are going to get started with our presentation. If you would like any more information about our company, TopEdit, please have a look at the website. My name is Gareth Dyke, and I am a researcher and academic with many years' experience writing and publishing my own academic work. I used to work in Ireland, so that's why if you listen to my voice, it sounds a little bit Irish. If you listen to the way that I speak English, I worked in Ireland, I worked in the UK, I've also worked in Hungary as a researcher, writing and publishing my own academic work. In my career, I've published about 280 academic papers overall. I also work as an editor. I work as the editor-in-chief for a biology journal, and I'm also working as an editor, language editor. So I certainly hope that some of the content, some of the information that I will provide in this presentation will be useful to you as you develop your English language writing skills. You're probably thinking, why should I listen to this presentation? What are we going to be talking about in this session? We are going to be talking about your message. We're going to be talking about understanding publication structure, how to manage the process, the writing process, and how to guide your next academic article into a leading target journal. That's the goal of this presentation. That's the goal of the English language training that we provide at TopEdit. We can help you with your writing, your editing, and of course with your learning needs as well. So if this presentation is of interest and you enjoy it, why not get in touch with one of our team? We can in the future provide you with something specific to your training needs at your university, perhaps. So we can help you understand the English writing process and, of course, be more effective with your writing. So let's talk about what we're going to be discussing in our presentation today, because you're probably thinking, why should I listen to this guy shouting at me in English for the next 45 minutes or so? We are going to be talking about what you should be thinking about before you start writing an academic article, how to write the different sections of an academic paper, and then publishing, what to do before submission, and then post-publication, managing that research impact journey. If you have questions, I encourage you to type your questions into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. We will have time at the end of this presentation to answer some questions. So maybe type them in as you are thinking of them, or better, because I have to watch the chat while giving the presentation, please save your questions to the end, and then we'll have a dedicated Q&A at the end of this presentation. Let's think, first of all, today about what you should be thinking about before you start to write an academic article. Here is a key take-home idea from this presentation. Think before you start to write about the message of your next paper. What is it that you want people reading your academic articles to get out of that experience? What is your take-home message? And we use this training technique with UK PhD students. Think about your grandmother, and here's a real picture of my grandmother, and think about bus drivers, perhaps people who do not understand the specifics of your academic work. How are you going to explain in simple, easy to understand terms what it is that your work is about? Because selling your message to an academic journal is absolutely critical if you're going to be successful getting it published in a leading international journal, because editors at international journals, they want clear messages in articles. And if editors can't work out your single take-home message, they're going to reject your paper. They will also reject your article if you haven't convinced them of your study's importance. I hope the audio is working now, because let me know again if you can't hear me, okay? What is your message? Editors will reject your papers if you haven't convinced them of your study's importance. They will think, I'm interested. As the editor, my readers will also be interested. So the first thing to think about before you start to write is, what's the message of your article? And we encourage authors at TopEdit to check the original nature of the results, the story, the take-home message before starting to write. Think about why your work is new and interesting, how it relates to a current hot topic, what's new and challenging, and do you provide, for example, a solution to a difficult problem with your work? It really is all in the story. Try to assemble the message of your article before you start to write into 1 or 2 sentences, the key message, the key take-home message of the work, because this will help you to more effectively sell that to a journal when it comes time to make a submission. Now, the second thing to know about before you start to write an article is, what is the target journal going to be for that piece of work? What is the target journal going to be? We are going to aim high, choose appropriately, and learn to sell and manage our article submissions as academics. We're going to aim high, go for journals with higher impact factors if possible when making submissions. This is the second key thing to know about before you start to write. What's the first? The first is your message. What's the second? The second is the journal, the target journal of the article. What's the third? The third thing to know about before you start to write is to make sure that you have the structure right, that you have prepared correctly for your article. Choosing your topic, identifying your audience, and gathering supporting details. Getting ready to write, because structure of academic articles is absolutely key as well before you get going with the writing process. Know your message, know your target audience, and know the structure of your writing before you start to write. And I can see that some people are asking questions about the audio for this lecture. My audio is working okay, I hope, but don't worry. Everybody listening to this session will get a follow-up email from our system, and you will get a link to a video of this presentation that you can watch again whenever you want. So I'm also aware that in this presentation there's lots of text on some of the slides. You don't need to worry about it now. You can re-watch this presentation later and use some of the content, some of the ideas the next time you have to write an academic paper. So this slide, the general structure of a full article, this slide is the most important slide you will see today in our webinar. The general structure of an academic paper, it consists of two sections: the abstract and the title, and the rest of the article. The abstract and the title and the rest of the paper. There are two sections to academic paper writing. You should put as much time and energy into the general sections, the title and the abstract, as you put into the rest of the paper. Why is that? Ask yourself, when was the last time you read all the way through an academic paper? Most people don't read all the way through academic papers. They just read the title and they just read the abstract. So for that reason, it's critical to think about, as you start to write your paper, what are you going to say in the title and what are you going to say in the abstract? What makes a good academic article title? Well, keep it short. In English is the key message from this section of the presentation. A good title should contain the fewest possible words to adequately describe the contents of your paper. Be effective. Identify the main issue, talk about the subject, and attract people's attention to your work. Get people thinking, that's an interesting paper. I'm going to read it because I want to find out what the answer is to that particular question, for example. So make your articles compelling. Get people interested in reading your papers. Be informative, be questioning. Maybe set up your next article title as a question, again, so readers will think, wow, that's an interesting question. I want to read the paper to find out the answer. And also put time and energy into writing your abstract. A good quality abstract is honest and precise, stands alone, no technical jargon, short and specific, and never forget that the quality of your abstract will inform your editor's decision as to whether or not to initially send your paper even out for peer review. Many papers at leading international journals get rejected before they get sent out for peer review because authors don't put the time and the energy into a good title and into a good quality abstract. If you struggle writing an abstract in English, and I know many people do, I used to struggle as well with my work, you can do it effectively by thinking about the structure of the writing. You can write a good quality abstract in English by answering the 4 questions here on the slide. At the bottom of the slide, write down these 4 questions and then answer them with information from your own research study, and then delete the questions. We do this in article writing workshops all the time, and it really works. You write down the questions and then you answer them. Why did you do the study? Answer that. What did you do? Answer that. What did you find? Answer that. And what did you conclude? Why did you do the work? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? The 4-question technique for writing abstracts. And this is the structure of the writing. This is what you need to have in your writing so that readers can understand what you're talking about. Make it easier for readers to follow what you say in your article by creating a structure to all of the different sections of your writing. And I'm going to show you in this presentation how you can do that for different sections of the article. Many journals, especially in your field, I know they also ask for structured abstracts anyway. Here's an example. You can do this in your writing even if your journal does not ask you for a structured abstract. Use the 4-question technique or put in information about the background, the methodology, the conclusions and significance. In that sequence, you'll end up with about 200 words that you can use for your next academic article, because, ladies and gentlemen, structure is the most crucial element of academic article writing. Your readers need to know throughout a paper where they've come from, where they are now, and where they are going. A plot is needed. An academic paper is like a story, just like any other kind of creative writing. The structure is what you need to have. I see that some people are saying that the picture's not clear. Well, again, I'm sorry about that. It may be the internet connection. We're broadcasting this presentation from the other side of the world. So, you know, something may be going on up there in the clouds. So don't worry though, I will give you a link. Our system will send you a link to this presentation so you can re-watch a clean version in your own time. But anyway, let's move on. We've talked about the abstract. We've talked about the title, key elements at the start of the paper writing process. What about the rest of the article? What about the introduction, the methods, the results, and discussion? We will now talk about the introduction. And in this section of your paper writing, don't forget to grab people's attention. Get people interested immediately in the crucial issue that your paper addresses. Keep it short. 2 or 3 paragraphs in an effective introduction are enough. You've got about 1,500 words to write an effective introduction for your next paper, because the average length of an academic article, it's about 5,000 or 6,000 words. So you've got to be balanced, and you don't want to write too much. Keep it short, grab the reader, and do not put a literature review. Do not put a literature review into your introduction. Lots of students think, I've written a literature review for my master's, for my PhD, I'm going to include it in all of my academic papers. No, your academic papers are about particular research questions. You can do this effectively in a much simpler way by taking the reader with the opening sentence straight to the issue. Get the most important details of your issue into the introduction and summarize the controversies and the best evidence, and end with a crisp and clear question at the end of your introduction. Here's a template you can use for writing an introduction to your next academic paper. Remember, I've given you some hints for title writing. I've given you some hints for abstract writing. Here's a template for your introduction. 3 sections. State the question. Tell the reader what the question is that your paper's going to address. Then give the reader what we call the state of the art in the 2nd section of the introduction. Tell them some recent relevant literature, review papers perhaps, that are pertinent, relevant to the question that your article seeks to address. And then wrap it up at the end. This study shows. Here we show. Look at any paper in Nature, any paper in Science, big journals, big international journals with massive impact factors. You will see that their introductions always finish in the same way. Here we show. This study shows. You tell the reader what's going to happen next in the rest of the article. Don't believe me? Go and have a look at a recent article published in Nature. You will see this structure to the writing. Now we come to the methods, and most people think the methods section, it's the boring bit. They don't like writing this bit of their academic papers, but no, this is the best bit of academic paper writing. Why? Because this is the section of your article where you get to take your readers on a journey through the work that you did in your study. What did you do first? What did you do second? What did you do third? What did you do fourth? What did you do last? Data collection, data analysis. The structure of your methods section should be organized as a timeline around the sequence of events that you went through, that you did, that you performed in your experiment or in your study, a timeline for your work. Give the reader all the methodological details necessary for another scientist to duplicate your work, a narrative of the steps that you took in your experiment, not a list of instructions, but give enough information in a timeline sequence. You need to do this, you need to give enough information, because the most common way, the most common reason for rejection of academic articles is because editors or peer reviewers feel that there's a problem in the methods section. So give enough detail so that a qualified reader can repeat the study. If your methods section is thin on details, then editors are going to worry that you're hiding something potentially. So enough information for somebody to repeat the study in a timeline sequence. Ask your colleagues, talk to people, ask them, have I put enough information here for somebody else to repeat the study? Very important. And actually, here's the good news. Actually, once you've written your methods section structure, you've put down that timeline sequence of subtitled headings for the different sections of your methods section, you're actually done with the structure of academic paper writing. Why? Because in the results and in the discussion, you will reintroduce topics in the same sequence as you introduce them in the methods section. Very important to keep that in mind. This technique works. Maintain the structure from the methods section in the results and then in the discussion so that readers know where they are. And again, in your results, here you often put together your figures, your tables of data before you do any other part of paper writing. Here you are presenting just the results, the facts, and nothing but the facts. And so these should be ordered in the same section, in the same subsections as you had in the methods section. Keep the sequence the same. And if you can use pictures rather than words, then that's a much better technique for writing the results section. Of course, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So try to summarize your information with figures rather than text. And then in the discussion, you are finally free to interpret what your results mean or why they differ from what other workers have found. Of course, discussion and interpretation are synonyms in English. So now you talk about what your results mean, you interpret your results in light of other published information, and answer that question that you posed at the beginning of the article, at the start of the introduction. Start your discussion section by telling your audience what it is that the answer to the question is. What they've been waiting for in your academic paper is to find out the answer to a particular question. So tell them what that is in the discussion. Here you interpret. Here you relate your discussion back to the questions that you raised in the introduction, and you limit your conclusions to what you're actually able to support. And don't forget to suggest future directions for research, new methods, for example, in your discussion section. If you think of something while you're writing up your paper or while you're doing your experiment that you're going to do in your future research, put it in the discussion. You must, because otherwise other people reading your work are going to think of that idea themselves potentially, and they're going to be able to do it without having cited you. So you want people to cite you, get that new idea, that new information into your paper so that people will have to cite you. In your discussion then, don't write an expansive essay that goes off in all directions. Start your discussion with a single sentence that states your main findings and discuss both your strengths and your weaknesses. Reviewers who look at your article will be considering what the weaknesses of your paper are. So it's important for you to put some information about your weaknesses into your discussion so that reviewers can't come up with those weaknesses for themselves. So very important to talk about your strengths and of course your weaknesses. Here's what we do in the discussion section of an effective academic paper. We relate the study to what's already been found. We discuss what the study means, and we talk about unanswered questions. And please, 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 please do not finish. Please don't finish your articles with statements like, more research will be needed before we can fully answer this question, or more research will be required before this hypothesis can be fully tested. It's a very weak way to finish your article, by the way, and of course, more research will always be needed. Don't write it. Finish your articles strong, like running a race. Finish your articles with the best, most significant conclusion from the study. Give the reader that key take-home message again at the end of the paper and structure your discussion in the same way that you structured your method section and your results section. Introduce information in the same sequence in these 3 sections at the end. So we've talked about things to know about before you start to write: your message, your audience, and your structure. And we've talked about the different sections of an academic paper. Now let's think about the submission process. What are you going to do when you send your article to a journal? You're going to go also with a covering letter, that communication that goes from you, the author, to the journal, tells the editor why the work is interesting and important. Don't waste your opportunity to sell your work. The cover letter is critical. The cover letter with the title and with the abstract are what editors look at when they're assessing submissions, deciding even whether or not to submit articles for peer review, whether they're going to send articles out for peer review. And don't forget that at big international journals, rejection rates are high. Editors are rejecting papers often before they send them out for peer review in 9 out of 10 cases in big international journals like Nature and Science, for example. So you want something that captures the editor's attention. Don't write something boring. Please consider this manuscript for publication in your esteemed journal is a waste of time. I work at a journal. This actually is the most common kind of covering letter that we get from authors. Nothing. They make submissions, they don't put a cover letter in, and we have no idea what to do with the paper. We've got no idea whether it should be sent out for peer review or not. Many authors, 60 or 70%, send us something like this: boring. Please find our paper enclosed, which we hope you will find interesting. Contains no useful information. You need something that captures the editor's attention, tells them why the work is interesting and why the work is important. Here you can see an example that I made up, but it's doing the job. It's capturing the editor's attention. It's telling them why the work is important. And also, don't forget to put some suggestions for reviewers into your cover letter, because many journals now, many academic journals, do not allow authors the opportunity to select reviewers as part of the submission process. So maximize your chances of success. Ladies and gentlemen, write a great cover letter. This is one of the first sections of your paper that an editor is going to read, so make it count. Why is your topic important? Why are the results significant? What's the key result? What's the breakthrough? Remember, we talked about this already at the start when we thought about our work before we started to write. We thought about what the main message of our paper was going to be before we started to write. So you should know this when you write your cover letter. Why is this an advance on previous work? And why are you submitting to this journal? Editors love it. They love it if you tell them about their own journal. Why have you picked this particular journal? Why are you submitting your work to this particular venue? And don't forget to provide reviewer suggestions in your cover letter as well. So editors will be able to pick effectively some people who will want to look at your paper and hopefully give it a favorable review. What happens next then? Of course, the paper goes out for peer review. We hope we've written a great paper with a clear message, well structured. The readers know what's happening. We've written a great covering letter. The paper comes back. You get to respond to peer review comments. Now, all of these topics, writing, paper structure, managing communication with editors, responding to peer reviews, are topics that we can present as additional training webinars. I'm just covering some of these topics in our presentation today to give you an overview of the process. The most important thing to do when your paper comes back from peer review is to fully incorporate those reviewers' suggestions and address them all in a response letter to your editor so that the editor gets the impression that you have taken the process seriously. This is key. This is how you manage the process. You have to be confident. You have to believe in your work. And actually, believing in your research and communicating positively about your research in cover letters, in articles, in presentations, when you talk to your professors, when you manage your communications with other international academics, confidence is actually one of the keys to success as an international researcher. Believe in your work and be positive, even when you get negative comments back on your work from peer reviewers, because of course papers get rejected, don't they? They get rejected all the time. In academia, we deal with more rejection than probably any other field, any other line of work, apart from maybe salespeople. We have to manage rejection. So you get negative comments on your work that you don't agree with. Be confident. Don't just take it. Write to the editor, talk to the editor, appeal to the editor, discuss with the editor about why you feel that you have been unfairly treated. This happens all the time in academia, and often editors will change their minds if you make a clear and coherent argument explaining the reasons why you feel you've been unfairly treated. This paper, I published this in 2013. It got reviewed at Nature Communications. It got hammered, it got rejected, it got thrown out by the journal because the reviews that came back were so bad, but they were really nasty as well, right? So we looked at them and we thought, these are not about the science, these are not about the content of the work. We need to talk to the editor. We need to appeal this decision. So we wrote a polite email to the editor. We said to them, can we please request a second round of reviews because we feel that we have been unfairly treated in the review process. The editor said, sure. The paper got sent out again for another round of peer review and it eventually got accepted. Do not just take it. Do not just roll over if you get unfairly treated in the journal peer review process, right? Talk to editors, talk to us, talk to our company, talk to our team. We can help you understand better about how to manage this process. Don't miss out on big international papers that can change the course of your career just because you get nasty peer reviews. I have a second example for you, not to advertise my own work, but just to give you some personal experience about how to manage this process successfully. Again, this paper got rejected by Nature, 2 reviews, 1 reviewer made a negative comment about the method. We looked at the reviews, we thought this reviewer doesn't understand the method that we've used. We wrote to the editor, we explained to the editor how the reviewer had misunderstood the method, we gave more information, and the paper got accepted. Hopefully you can see my point about confidence. I hope you can increase your level of confidence with your research, believe in your work, and make sure that you do get your work published in leading international journals. Let's now talk in the remaining few minutes of our presentation today about what happens after your paper gets published, how to manage impact. We capture research impact as academics in terms of value for money, funding, and strategy. Research policymakers, governments, people who give you money for your research want to make sure that they're giving you money and that money is being spent well. You need to justify your existence as a researcher to funding agencies, to your university, to your research group. How can you assess your impact? It's not just about where your work gets published. Academic impact in terms of journal impact factors, H indexes, I indexes, is part of the story. But I know, especially in your field, socioeconomic and societal benefits are also valuable and are also captured and of interest clearly to governments, to policymakers, and to people who are funding research. So think about your impact the next time you put together a research project. Of course, impact is initially based on readership. Who are the readers of your work? Who are the people using and citing your work? Which of your readership groups, researchers, policymakers, or the general public potentially, are going to be most impactful to you as a researcher? You can assess your impact as a researcher by looking at these action points. And not a lot of people do this. Not a lot of academics do this. You should be thinking about the attention your work is getting, the interest in your work, and then people's desire to take action over the work that you publish. How can you assess this as a researcher? Well, you can look at how people interact with your papers and also how people interact with the other ways that you transmit information online: shares, mentions, clicks, views, downloads, press coverage, and citations. And imagine how powerful would it be if you went to your next job interview or your next PhD interview or your next funding application, you wrote into your next funding application some of these data. My last research project resulted in these quantifiable outputs, these quantifiable metrics for impact. Give it some thought. Think about your research projects as journeys. I encourage you to not just think about impact after your work gets published. Think about your research impact as a journey. Inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. So important to assess these along the road of the research project. So when you next start a research project, think about how you can put this together, how you can assess and manage your impact on the road to publication. Inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. You also need to get yourself identifiable to international colleagues. Everybody really should be identifiable around the world. And one way to do this is by signing up for an ORCID researcher identification number. More and more journal submission sites are requiring authors or suggesting that authors have these identification numbers when making submissions. And I'm sure you've seen articles that have gotten published with these little green researcher identification tags on them. Very important to be distinguishable. You can also use an ORCID ID to build your CV without doing any work, because the system, once you sign up for it, will start to import all of your publications, all of your outputs from other international databases like Scopus, like PubMed, like ResearchGate, for example. So have a think about this as part of the submission process. An ORCID ID can be useful to you as a researcher to speed up, expedite, make more efficient that submission process. Ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line, the fundamental message of this presentation is that you will get published if you pick an important research question. You use the right method to answer it. You write a short, clear account of the study that follows a tight structure and uses effective writing to convey your message clearly. Keep in mind that science has become more cross-disciplinary, but reviewers have not. Peer reviewers are going to be looking for issues with your work. So as you write, as you put together your papers, think about where the problems are going to be, what reviewers are going to say, and preempt them by writing about them in your paper. And in particular, as we've discussed, it's the methods section where peer reviewers and editors will go first to look for problems. So don't forget to bulletproof, don't forget to waterproof your methods section in particular. Pick an important research question, that's your problem. Use a clear and correct method to answer that research question. Again, that's your problem, but we can help at TopEdit if you need assistance with writing, with training, with English language communication skills, and the actual writing of the paper itself. So if you have found this presentation interesting and useful, I encourage you to get in touch with us. We have talked about your message, publication structure, and managing and guiding the publication process. If you forget everything from this webinar, try to remember one thing, and that's the 3 points, the 3 things that you need to know before you start to write. What's your message? Who are your audience going to be? So that's what target journal are you going to pick? And what's the structure of the writing going to look like? Your message, your audience, and your structure. Try, for my sake, to remember those 3 elements of writing as you get started. And Winston Churchill, here he is, once said that success consists of going from failure to failure without losing any of your enthusiasm. And this is so important for young researchers like you guys listening to this presentation today. Try to manage rejection, try to deal with rejection, try to manage that experience, always move on from rejection and try to improve. You can submit to another journal, you can appeal to the editor, you always learn, you always improve as you move through your academic careers. Thank you guys, thank you so much for listening. My name is Gareth Dyke and this is our information, the information of our company. I'm here, you can see me again on the webcam. If you have questions, let's type those questions now into the chat box down there on the right-hand side of the screen. We will spend a few minutes at the end of our session now, at the end, to answer a few of your questions. It's been my pleasure to give this presentation. If you have questions, I welcome them. The first question that somebody put into the chat over the course of this presentation is, how do we determine what kind of content that we write about, that we do research about, is good? How do we determine if our content is good? And it's very difficult, I know, for international students to see and get over that confidence barrier to make sure that their research is as good as it can be and that the content is appropriate. The best way to do this, my opinion, is to have a look at other articles recently published in your field in leading international journals. So we all have a research area, a specific research field. Can you have a look online at recent articles that have been published and see what other international colleagues are doing with their research? And that will give you an idea, not just about what informative questions are going to be, what content is going to be good, because journals are already publishing on that kind of thing, but it also helps you to manage your style and develop a good style that is appropriate for international publishing. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, we say in English. Have a look at what other international colleagues are publishing. That will give you ideas for your own work. The second question that we have had is about review articles. Are the tips and tricks presented in this session the same as those that you would use for a review article? Not really is the answer to that. I've talked today about the general structure of a research article. If you want information about writing review articles, then of course we can happily provide that, but writing review papers is quite a different thing. It's quite a different area to think about. The number one tip for writing a review article is to make sure that you have an interesting question. That goes without saying, but also talk to editors before you submit, because it's very difficult to get review papers published blind. Journals usually invite people to submit review articles. So you need to get an editor, a journal lined up and willing to consider your review paper before you start to write it. Another question that you guys have asked me is about rejection. What if rejection demotivates us? Well, this is something that everybody experiences. Academic papers get rejected. Academic articles, grant applications, job applications always get rejected. So how you deal with that is going to determine the course of your academic career. So I know it's demotivating. I know it can be hugely demotivating to get your paper rejected, but take some time, wait for a few weeks, let the dust settle, and try to find the positives from those emails, from those rejection emails. Often papers get rejected because they're just not quite considered good enough or appropriate enough for a particular journal. And if you're aiming high with your submissions, going to the best journals possible, you're going to experience rejection, but you're also going to get papers published in excellent international journals. Next question. If a paper is published in an SCI journal and another is published in a non-SCI journal, but the second one, the non-SCI paper, has more citations, which one is better? Now, that's a very good question. I would say that the primary thing that we're looking for to assess research quality is the number of citations. And actually, when you look at the number of citations and you factor that against the quality of the journal, that's one way that the H index for authors is calculated. So the answer to that question, from my perspective, would be that I would rather publish a paper that gets more citations, that's used more, than a paper that never gets cited but that comes out in Nature. So, I mean, that's a relative question, I think, because lots of fields don't publish their articles in SCI journals anyway, but I would personally prefer citations over journal impact factor. But anyway, you said to mention about weaknesses. What types of weaknesses can they be, and is it necessary to do so? I would say, in answer to this question, that you need to be aware of the shortcomings of your research, what your research cannot address. You're targeting your research at a particular question, right? But you also need to think about what questions your research can't answer, so you can talk about them in your discussion. Gives you topics for discussion at the end of the paper. You can also then bring that back around and discuss those areas later and cite yourself in your next article. Innovative ideas of possible monetary benefit to be patented first or submitted in the article initially. I think you need to patent, you need to protect ideas before you publish them, because obviously once you send an article onto a preprint server or you put it out for peer review, you're opening yourself up to intellectual property issues. So try to patent, I would say, before publishing if you have an idea that's potentially going to be of monetary value. I would talk to your university about that, to your research group. Any recommendations for how we can be sure about the content of scientific literature, because we're often skeptical regarding our own content? Good question. Again, this comes back to citations. If an article is not getting cited, then you can be sure that it's probably not useful or not considered to be of great value in the academic community. So that's how I would answer that particular question. We have a question about modifying images. I'll send you some follow-up information about that, because we can certainly help you with that as well. Okay, so if I got rejection, what changes to do for the next time? You need to make as many changes as possible to keep the editor happy. So I would say change everything that you can change in your article before you send the paper back to the same journal. But if you're going to a different journal, that's a different story, because then you can take on board the comments that you agree with, that you find useful in your work, change those, ignore the others, send your article to another journal. Right, I hope, I think that we're coming up against our time for this session today. So thank you all once again for listening. I will say goodbye, and I hope that we have the chance to present another webinar to you guys in the future. Keep in touch, have a look at our website, get in touch with our team if we can provide any additional information, any additional help, or indeed you need editing or education services. Thank you one and all. Have a great day.